I have been designing director's treatments and pitch decks for commercials for years. And over time, I have developed a process that helps me turn a script, or sometimes just a very simple idea, into a visual world. So in this video, I want to show you exactly how I do it. Hi, I am Barbaros. I am a filmmaker based in Washington, D.C., and welcome to my channel. Even though every project is different, the way I approach a new treatment usually follows a similar process. From reading the script and understanding what the film actually needs, to researching references, building a visual language, writing the treatment, and finally putting everything together into a deck. So today I'm going to take you through that entire process, step by step, and show you some examples from my own work along the way. Let's get started. So what exactly is a director's treatment? A director's treatment is basically your interpretation of the film before the film actually exists. You take the script or the creative brief and explain how you see it as a director, what it should like, how it should feel, how the camera should move, how the characters should behave, and what kind of world you want to create around them. So it's not just a pretty PDF filled with beautiful images. Every image, every reference, and every design choice should help communicate your vision of the film. And this is also what separates a treatment from a simple mood board. A mood board can establish a look or a feeling. A director's treatment needs to tell us why those choices belong to this particular film. The pitch deck is essentially the presentation that brings all of those ideas together. So very simply, you start with a script, you develop your interpretation, and the treatment turns that interpretation into a visual language. The first thing I do is actually not look for images. Before I open Pinterest, Shotdeck, Vimeo, or start searching for references, I try to understand the idea behind the film. I read the script or the brief a few times and ask myself some very simple questions. What is this film really about? What should the audience feel? What is the tone? Is it funny, emotional, energetic, intimate, raw, or stylized? And most importantly, what can I bring to it as a director? Because at this stage, the goal is not to just make the script look good. It is to find my own interpretation of it. Sometimes that interpretation can be a very simple sentence or single idea. But once I have that, it becomes the foundation for everything that comes next. The references, the cinematography, the production design, the casting, even the rhythm of the edit. So before I start building the visual world, I try to understand why that world should exist in the first place. Once I have a clear idea of what I am looking for, I start collecting references. For commercial work, there are three platforms I use quite a lot: Source Creative, Frameset, and Shotdeck. Source Creative is especially useful when I am researching commercials. I can look at what other directors and production companies are doing and find references for storytelling, performance, editing, camera movement, or the overall tone of a film. Frameset is another tool I use a lot for visual research, especially when I am looking for very specific types of shots or visual ideas. And then there is Shotdeck, which is great for finding cinematic references from films and building a more specific visual language around things like lighting, composition, lenses, color, or production design. But when I'm collecting references, I try not to choose images just because they look beautiful. I always ask myself, what am I actually referencing here? Maybe this image is about the lighting, this one is about framing, this commercial is about the camera movement, and this one might have nothing to do with the visual style. I might just love the performance or the rhythm of the edit. Because the goal isn't to copy the reference. The goal is to use to communicate something that would otherwise be difficult to explain with words. Once I have the idea and enough references, I start building the structure of the treatment. There isn't one fixed structure that works for every project. Every script and every brief is different. So I try to build the deck around what that particular film actually needs. But most of my treatments usually start with a short director's note, where I introduce my overall approach to the project. From there, I break it down into sections like the story, characters and casting, cinematography, production design, locations, wardrobe, editing, music, and sound. Sometimes I'll have a separate section for performance, camera movement, transitions, or a specific visual technique if it plays an important role in the film. And I always try to think about the order of these sections as a journey. I don't want the treatment to feel like a technical document or a checklist. Ideally, by the time you reach the final page, you should already be able to imagine the film in your head. Once I have the structure and the references, I start actually designing the deck. I personally use Adobe InDesign for all of my treatments. You definitely don't need to be a professional graphic designer to make a good director's treatment, but I think having at least a basic understanding of graphic design can make a huge difference. Things like typography, hierarchy, spacing, margins, image placement, and knowing how to balance text and images can really change the way your ideas are presented. When I was learning InDesign, one resource that helped me a lot was Nigel French's book on InDesign. I also enjoyed very much Adobe Illustrator Classroom in a Book, which helped me learn Illustrator, at least on a basic level. And also in terms of typography, Ellen Lupton's book, Thinking with Type, helped me understand the basic information about typography. I also follow the Yes, I Am a Designer YouTube channel, which has some really useful tutorials on both Adobe software and graphic design fundamentals. When I am designing a treatment, I also try to think about the deck almost like I am editing a film. Every page has a rhythm. You might have a page with more text, followed by a full bleed image. Then maybe a collage of references, followed by something much simpler with a lot of negative space. I don't want every page to look the same, but I do want the entire treatment to feel like it belongs to the same visual board. And ultimately, good design shouldn't distract from your ideas. It should make those ideas easier to understand and hopefully make the reader want to keep turning the pages. And ultimately, good design shouldn't distract from your ideas. It should make those ideas easier to understand and hopefully make the reader want to keep turning the pages. I should also mention that alongside my filmmaking work, I've worked professionally as a pitch deck and treatment designer, creating decks for directors and production companies. So if you'd like to see more examples of my work, or if you are looking for someone to design a treatment for your own project, you can find a link to my website in the description below. Before we finish, I want to quickly talk about a few mistakes I try to avoid when designing a treatment. The first one is simply having too much text. People are usually going through these decks quite quickly, so I try to keep the writing clear, direct, and easy to follow. The second is using too many references. More images don't necessarily communicate your idea better. Sometimes one very specific reference can say much more than 10 beautiful but unrelated images. Another mistake is choosing references simply because they look good. Every image should have a reason to be there. It should tell us something about the lighting, the framing, the performance, the production design, the camera movement, or the overall feeling of the film. And finally, references are there to communicate an intention, not something you should simply copy. The goal of the treatment is not to explain every single shot of the film. It is to give the reader enough information to start imagining the film for themselves. And that's basically my process. Of course, every project is different and my approach continues to change from one treatment to another. But the basic idea is always the same. Understand the script, find your own interpretation, collect the right references, and then bring everything together into a clear and engaging visual presentation. For me, a director's treatment is much more than just a pitch deck. In a way, it is the first version of the film. The film doesn't exist yet. There are no actors, no locations, no cinematography, no edit. So for a few minutes, this document has to make the agency, the client, or the production company feel like they can already see it. And if you can do that, I think the treatment has done its job. Thank you so much for watching. I am Barbaros, and if you're interested in filmmaking, directing, and the creative process behind making films, consider subscribing to the channel. I will see you in the next one.